Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our Thursday Nichecast coming at you on the 23rd of November. We're from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. Fresh yarns on our website. We got 2 National League weekly deep dives that are ready for your eyeballs to have a check on before we discuss them in today's podcast, as well as, or ahead of, what we're calling the Mount Smart Extravaganza, with National League finals on Sunday, Phoenix doubleheader on the Saturday. So you can read about National League football on our website. I have done the Plunket Shield first stanza all white, crikey Jack. The Plunket Shield first stanza all stars. That is published on our website at the moment as well. We'll be doing a emerging player all-stars as well from the first stanza to highlight some of the younger players. There's lots of cricket content. We've got an HBJ Shield first weekend wrap-up. We got a Black Caps pipeline deep dive live. There's also Black Caps test squad previewy thing for the Bangladesh series that was written before Neil Wagner's inclusion, so you can check in with all Kiwi cricketing matters, obviously heading into the cricket season. So the niche case is where you get all your cricketing needs sorted. And there is a little Kiwi-NRL Aotearoa Kiwis development check-in with Nofahu White, Keanu Kinney, and Whittamu Greg, none of whom actually played for the Kiwis. But as I'll touch on when I explore a bit of Michael Maguire staying on as Kiwis coach, all 3 were part of the development setup there. They played for the A team. Nofahu White didn't play for the A team, but he was 18th man for the Kiwis. And all 3 have really interesting Kiwi-NRL situations as well. So basically, if you like the niche case, if you like this podcast, check out our website, the niche-case.com, for big, in-depth explorations of Aotearoa sporting matters that you won't find anywhere else. Like, obviously, the big Donnies of Aotearoa media, they're more worried about global matters and don't seem to care about any domestic cricket, Kiwi-NRL, domestic football, local football. And that's what we're here for, to pick up the slack. So if you do like this podcast, Kōrero, make sure you check out our website. And let's get a bit of mindfulness here. Let's inject the mindfulness into our podcast. What do you got?
Yeah, righto. Bit of Tao Te Ching for you, coming in today with the way the Tao Te Ching's written is in all those little really short chapters, like 3 paragraphs each, and you get these really good 2-3 kind of line stanzas. But I just wanted to take the first line of this one because I liked it a lot. I was looking through to find a good one, and this is what stuck out, where it goes, start of chapter 27, if you want to look up the rest of it yourself. A good traveler leaves no tracks.
Beauty. I gave you a little nudge, and I was like, can you dive into Tao Te Ching and deliver some mindfulness? Because I was curious what you would choose, because I listen to the Tao Te Ching every night before I doze off for a little kip. I have my dose of Tao Te Ching. And it's like, no matter what happens in the day, no matter how good you feel, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how little you meditate, no matter how little yoga you're doing, or whatever self-care practices you're up to, I've always been able to, and I've made a real focus of listening to the Tao Te Ching every night. So it's like, that is my minimum. That's the least I can do. And I feel pretty good about it because I love Tao Te Ching, and the traveler shouldn't leave any tracks. It's a lot of sage chat in the Tao Te Ching. It's all about the sage, and the sage doesn't leave that imprint.
Sage as in like the wise person, not sage as in like a sage bush, or we're not talking herbs and spices here.
I don't know.
Maybe we are. Maybe we are.
But yes, obviously,
you don't leave tracks, you're right.
It's the wise old sage. Yeah. And yeah, so can you repeat that again?
Uh, what did I say? Chapter 27 is a good traveler leaves no tracks.
Beauty. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Move like water, you know, pass through the world without doing harm, but also without, I don't know. I think a lot of the monuments and stuff that you see, the great achievements of human engineering and things like this, they're important in an artistic sense, but I often wonder how much those are just built because someone wanted to leave a legacy. It's like eventually they forget who you were. They just see a building, you know. It's that kind of stuff is built upon the workings of the ego, and is not necessarily whether that's the outcome or not. Great works of art are probably a good example of something. Many of them driven by an artist's ego, but also the thing that lives on isn't that, despite that being the intent. The thing that lives on is the work, and it's kind of irrelevant to its author at that point. So that's another idea about the kind of like moving like water is just just don't worry about that stuff, you know. Just pass through in rhythm with the rest of the world, like yeah, your own little molecule within the river, your own little water molecule within the river. You know, you're just going with everything else. You don't want to swim against the tide because you can't.
Upon reflection, I think the timelines of these things cross over because when you listen to the Tao Te Ching or any of these other kind of books or things before you sleep, you just kind of absorb it. It just gets deep into your loins, and you become it. That's a good reason why you should do that stuff as you're winding down. And in this phase of had a lot of ideas about legacy because you see so much of it in the sporting world where it's like, what's your legacy? Even like the after the Cricket World Cup, Pat Cummins wins the Cricket World Cup, and it's about his legacy. It's about the Australian team's legacy, and there's a lot of legacy chat in every realm of our existence, like the sports, the music, the business, the entrepreneur. It's all about legacy, and I think that's the most egotistical thing ever. Like, you're doing this thing just so people can remember you. You're doing these things just so people understand how good you were. It's like, yeah, this is a legacy play. Well, you're just big up in yourself. Like that is literally what the ego is all about. So I'm not really a big fan of any legacy chat. Like that's just ego. And you do hear it from people who are like they are aware of separating the ego from whatever you want to call it, the soul or whatever, who they are. And those, people are also all about their legacy. And
Not everyone lives the words they preach.
and I am learning that legacy is just your ego. And I, as someone who's working through the ego process and trying to release the ego and just be more of the sage, more of that type of vibration, you gotta get rid of the legacy. Like your legacy doesn't matter. Let's be honest, you're a piece of shit like just the rest of us, and no one like I don't actually think many people actually care about your legacy, not you, but just the Joker with the legacy. People don't really care about your legacy. The only person who cares about your legacy is you, so you're remembered in a favorable fashion, so you're, rubbing up your ego. It's all quite interesting, but not a fan of the legacy these days.
Yeah, well, you remember when the Last Dance documentary came out, and like most people loved it and breezed through it and enjoyed the whole thing, but the reason that existed was because we'd reached a point in history where kids were ready to say that LeBron James was the greatest basketballer of all time, and Michael Jordan wanted to say, "Hold on a second, hold my beer, wait up there." That's basically why that existed, because that footage was in the can for ages and no one was allowed to use it because Michael Jordan had the image rights or some bloody legal thing about it. Like, do we expect like, 20 years ago, if you asked people who the greatest footballers of all time, I think it was kind of a standard thing of it's Pele and it's Maradona. Um, Maybe an Englishman might say George Best or something for for a fleeting moment there. But nowadays, if you ask someone, it's probably Messi or Ronaldo. And I kind of think that's just how it's supposed to be. It's like your legacy is where you were at the day you retired. Like, were you the highest test run scorer at the moment you retired, kind of thing? Then you get to keep that forever. But someone's still going to overtake you. And you shouldn't be expecting to hold on to those records, and you shouldn't be expecting future generations who never saw you play to treat you higher than the players that gave them so much joy seeing them play throughout their lives, especially in formative years. Like this, the stuff is really clinging on to something that's incredibly fleeting. Like it's the passage of time, and it's trying to halt that. It's like that's the other thing about moving like water in a river is the river doesn't stop. If it stops, it becomes stagnant, right? It has to keep flowing. Just like time.
Yeah, you went deep into the sporting thing. Yeah, like everything you said is correct. I'd like to bring it back to just legacy is ego. Just a nice little bite there. So anytime we hear someone talking legacy, or the audience out there hears someone talking about their legacy, they really just want to celebrate themselves. And that is all ego, obviously. We also deliver our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. We got our Friday newsletter coming out tomorrow. Tomorrow I will be diving into a New Zealand women's 11 to take on Pakistan in a tour game, 2 tour games. Pakistan preparing to face the White Ferns in Aotearoa. So we did have a New Zealand 11 named: Lee Casbrick, Bella Armstrong, Ocean Bartlett, Flora Devonshire, Olivia Gain, Izzy Gaze, Abby Gherkin, Bella James, Kaylee Knight, Rosemary Meir, Nancy Patel, Georgia Plummer, Gabby Sullivan. That is your squad. And I will be exploring a lot of the young players selected. So we've got Ocean Bartlett, Flora Devonshire from CD, both of whom are spinners. Bella James and Olivia Gain. I did throw this up. It might have been on the Tuesday show. I was curious, like, who's going to be the best batter for Otago? And I am thinking about this in the next round of HBJ Shield. Like, who's just the best batter in New Zealand? Because Amelia Kerr's the best women's batter from New Zealand, but they're in the Women's Big Bash League. Who's second? It's either Susie Bates or Sophie Devine. Who's third? It's either Susie Bates or Sophie Devine. So who is the best domestic batter in New Zealand? Hold that thought for the HBJ Shield discussion. But the Olivia Gain and Bella James are both trying to get that spot for Otago, and they are also 2 powerful batters. So I think that's an interesting wrinkle considering how various White Ferns have been selected. I think they're looking for a bit more power, and Olivia Gain and Bella James both have that. Abby Gherkin's a youngster from Canterbury, hasn't scored a lot of runs recently though. Kaylee Knight is a very good seam bowling prospect from ND, and you've also got Gabby Sullivan, basically the best seamer outside the White Ferns, so she gets a crack there as well. I'll be diving into that tomorrow for our Friday news. That I'll also be updating the Women's Big Bash League, where Susie Bates, Sophie Devine, and Amelia Kerr and Jess Kerr are playing Perth. Sophie Devine, they are second as of Thursday morning. Amelia Kerr, they had a loss to the Sixers. So the Heat lost to the Sixers, I think, last night. And the Heat are 4th. The Sixers are 5th. They're competing for that final spot. The top 4 go into Women's Big Bash League finals. We have Jess Kerr did play in that game for the Sixers, and that's interesting because she missed a bunch of games. She's only played 4 games. She's got 4 wickets at an average of 25, and she was pretty good in the win over her sister yesterday. Susie Bates has moved back up to open, and I mean, they won, so that's all right. But it's still weird when you look at Susie Bates, 155 runs at an average of 14. Strike rate of 95. So it's weird areas for Susie Bates at the moment. But if the Sixers get into the top 4 and Bates is there, it's going to taste a whole lot better after that tournament finishes. Amelia Kerr, 226 runs, average of 28, strike rate of 119. So literally basically double what Susie Bates has done and a better strike rate. Amelia Kerr, 8 wickets and an average of 28, 7.7. Good, not spectacular. And so this continues the Amelia Kerr theme of elite, world-class batting and solid leg spin. Just solid at this stage. Sophie Devine, 446 runs, average of 40, strike rate of 146. She's also got 11 wickets and an average of 26, 8.4 RPO. Sophie Devine, one of the most expensive Perth bowlers, but she's doing a job as skipper as well. You will be updating the Kiwis in the NBL for our Friday Dispatch newsletter. Who's standing out at this stage?
Well, I'll also, of course, be doing some National League stuff on there because it is the last Women's National League Team of the Week. Will be in that one, the very last one, the last Team of the Week for the season. After this, it becomes Team of the Season. And I think, just thinking about it now, we are going to talk about this later, though, so I won't do this now. But I will just say I might write a bit of a preview on the upcoming National League Grand Finals as well for that one. And yeah, want to get into a couple of ideas about some of these dudes in the NBL. In particular, I'll have a little bit of a look-see, but I think there's a couple ones that compare kind of interestingly against the Breakers, who I'm also trying, hopefully going to finish writing an article about them tomorrow about how they've been struggling so far. The Perth Wildcats are interesting because they were in a similar spot to the Breakers, and then they beat the Breakers, and they've actually been quite good recently. And one of the things they've done to get a bit better, two of the things they've done, it's given its take from a Kiwi perspective, because Corey Webster, I think, was out injured last week, but before he was out injured, he was getting, I think he had 2 DMPs in a row. Like, he basically just got dropped out of the rotation. So like, well, we got one too many shooters here. We need a little bit more of that selfless ball movement kind of stuff, which isn't necessarily Corey's fault. It's just maybe that's not currently an ideal fit for how the Wildcats are trying to play. And unfortunately, Bryce Cotton is a former MVP, and he takes the reins there. But the other thing they've done to help improve their form is they've elevated Hyrum Harris to the starting lineup. So Hyrum Harris is not necessarily putting up big stats, but you're seeing he's starting to get bigger minutes, and he's doing a lot of those things that are making other dudes better. He's defending like a champion. He's rebounding. He's boxing out. He's hustling up, down, and everywhere. Doing Hyrum Harris kind of things, which is exactly what we knew he was going to do as soon as an NBL team finally just let him loose and said, this dude is a key part of our top rotation. We're not going to just have him playing off the bench like he did in Adelaide. We're not going to have him sitting in the New Zealand NBL watching as he was doing before that. I think he had a year as Illawarra as a DP as well before that. So he's bounced around a bit, just waiting for someone to be like, okay, maybe he doesn't have the best jump shot, but he does everything else so well. And the Perth Wildcats have been the team who have realized that, and putting him into the starting lineup is starting to change things. Another one that's quite interesting is the Melbourne United stuff, because it sounds like there was a bit of a farewell to Rob Lowe. He is returning back to Auckland now. He was only on there with Melbourne as a as a designated injury replacement player up until Joe Luala-Keel came back, and then he came back, but a couple other guys got injured, so they kept him around for like 3 or 4 weeks after that. A couple times he didn't play at all. Other times he ended up playing big minutes, just depending on who was injured. Now he has flown back to be with family full-time, as he intended to do when he retired in the first place. They have said there's a possibility if other guys get injured, he might be called back up. But for now, he's away from the team, and out of that for Melbourne United. But had a great impact while he was there. I think he had a defensive rating under 100, and doing great things when in the whatever role he was asked to do, whether it was 5 minutes off the bench or 25 minutes off the bench. He was doing great things, carrying on from his MVP form in the New Zealand League. We've also seen at Melbourne, because that's an interesting one when you think about the Breakers having struggled with injuries throughout the season. And here's a guy who chose to retire rather than re-sign on whatever shorter terms the Breakers had offered him. Apparently, that is the case, as they sort of lowballed him with the offer, which I don't even think is that unfair because they weren't playing him that much. If you're only given to do 15 minutes, you're not going to pay him like a starter. The issue is more that he should have been getting more than 15 minutes because he's better than that. And if you look at what the Breakers have been doing now with their big men, and particularly since Cheatham got injured, but even then, Cheatham really being a power forward, being asked to play centre, and their other centres not quite doing so well. The absence of Rob Lowe looks pretty notable, especially when you think about how he's only an injury replacement for Melbourne, and the Breakers have had injuries to their big man rotation and are struggling to cover that. There he is doing great things for a rival team who are winning all the time, whereas the Breakers are losing all the time at the moment. Also, because there have been injuries, in particular to Matthew Dellavedova, one of the other things we've seen in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks is Flynn Cameron starting to get a bit more of a presence with Melbourne United in his first season as a pro. I think he had a 10-point game the other week. Then he had like a 14-8 game, 14 points, 8 rebounds. Probably see that sink a little bit now because Dellavedova is back after the international break. There's no games this weekend, but we'll be back into it next weekend. International break, even though there's no Australia or New Zealand internationals going on, just a FIBA break. Emphasis on the break rather than on the FIBA. But so I think Flynn Cameron's role will dip down a little bit after that, just because of the rotations. But in the opportunity that came along to him, he showed why he's such a promising Kiwi player, why he was getting, opportunities with the Tall Blacks at the World Cup, despite having not yet played the NBL stuff, why he's, why he had such a strong college career and all this, and why he was highly recruited by NBL teams and chose to go to Melbourne and all this. We're starting to see he's going to have if he stays in the NBL long term, he's going to have an outstanding career there. He's a brilliant player. And this last month has been the first real glimpse of that after a little bit of a slow start, trying to find his feet and figure out his role for Melbourne United. We saw the goods from Flynn Cameron in the last couple of weeks, and that might be hitting pause for now, but that'll swing back around pretty soon, I'm sure.
Yesterday, we also recorded our subscriber podcast that is available to the generous folks in the Patreon whānau and those with a paid Substack subscription. Big up to everyone through either platform who donates and supports the Niche Case directly. We are getting a little sprinkling of new additions, so we do appreciate all the newcomers and obviously the homies who have supported the Niche Cage for a long time. We appreciate it a lot, and we deliver our bonus content through Patreon and Substack for those generous folks. Yesterday, we had our subscriber podcast straight after the All Whites had a 1-1 draw with the Republic of Ireland. We also touched on some Plunket Shield youngsters, but I'm curious, 24 hours later, and you also included your match day notes as part of our dispatch for the subscriber podcast. So not only do you have the subscriber podcast where you get to listen to us more on spin some yarns about Kiwi sport, but you also get some stats, some notes, some background information that we are working through. Basically just our work is part of those dispatches. And you had 2 pages of notes there about the All Whites. We discussed the All Whites draw straight after that game, but 24 hours later, do you have anything to add?
Well, one specific just on the meaningless, well, not meaninglessness, but just a bit of context behind that Greece result. Remember the whole 2-0 defeat there, and we were talking about how that maybe they just lost to a better team and there's no need to overreact to it, and then they come and get a great result against Ireland, and that's forgotten. Greece actually drew 2-2 with France yesterday at around the same time as the All Whites were playing Ireland. So that puts that into a little bit of context for how that one went. Other than that, I mean, I've just been sort of simmering on how well Sarpreet Singh played, on Libby Kakache having his best All Whites game for a while, on Matt Garbutt in the second half in particular, stepping up after I thought a little bit of an iffy half. I find with Garbutt, his reputation sometimes precedes his sort of production, but then but then he'll have these, like, I don't think he was very good against Greece, for example, sometimes he tries to do too much and other times he kind of fades in. He's quite inconsistent like that. But then when he just pulls off the big moments, it's like, yeah, I'll take that. It's lovely taking goal from him, and he was really good in the second half. And interesting as well, they did a lot of that after they did it with Chris Wood out there first. The best they played was in the sort of 15 minutes before halftime, and then around that spell where they scored the goal. Well, Chris Wood was out there, but Chris Wood also got subbed off after 60 minutes, and they didn't stop looking to score. I will say, I think maybe Woodsy puts away one of those, or at least goes closer to putting away one of those sort of 2 or 3 or 4 chances that Max Mata had. That's just the difference between a guy who plays at League One and a guy who plays in the Premier League. But it's good, like another good sign for the All Whites to see them being able to produce stuff and play good football, good attacking football, without the guy who scores predominantly all of their goals and who they often rely on a little bit too much. I think it's probably there's 2 ways you can go with this: is to try find out new ways to get Chris Wood more involved because he's the best goal scorer and then they need to score more goals, or it's to maybe try figure out ways to do it without Chris Wood and build that up. The sort of like Bill Simmons' Ewing theory, right? It's like, can you do it without your best player, and then you put the best player back into the mix a bit more, and rather than playing through Chris Wood, let everyone just kind of play naturally and let those other guys believe they can do stuff without him. So I think that was quite promising as well, how the last half hour of that, they still played really well. And attacking and defensively, Ireland barely had a sniff except when the All Whites made one mistake. I think Joe Bell got tackled. It was their only real chance of scoring in the last 15 minutes, despite it being a 1-1 game and them being the home team, supposedly with more depth on the bench and all this kind of thing too. So just lots of positivity around that result. It's a pity we won't see them for a little while, but it's a great note to end the year on for All Whites football.
I would like to underline the fact that Greece drew with France. So maybe Greece is quite good at football, much better than New Zealand at football. So losing to Greece ain't that bad, and maybe folks should, I don't know, tap in with a more positive disposition, repeating that from Tuesday. Like, just be more positive about Kiwi sport, because when you dive into it, things aren't as bad as they appear. Hashtag mindfulness right there. Quick word about Michael Maguire. Again, some folks had their knickers in a twist about Michael Maguire being Kiwis coach, and the whole process of wanting to kick Michael Maguire out just felt like absolute self-sabotage. And New Zealand Rugby League isn't foreign to self-sabotage. Like, it's eaten itself a few times. I had here, don't eat from within. There's a bit of a cannibalistic nature about New Zealand Rugby League and obviously other sports. But thinking back through some of the worst times with New Zealand Rugby League, it is like people from within having their knickers in a twist and kicking up a stink, and then things move in the wrong direction. But Michael Maguire, praise Jah. Michael Maguire is still the New Zealand Kiwis coach. He's doing a fantastic job, I believe, not only in leading the high-performance Aotearoa Kiwis to wins and good performances, but there are serious development pipelines. That's the buzzword at the moment, the pipelines. We got Black Caps pipelines, we got All Whites pipelines, New Zealand sporting pipelines, and the Kiwis pipeline is one of those, because what I just talked about at the start of the show, Nofahu White, Keanu Kinney, Wiremu Greg, all getting a taste of Aotearoa Kiwis camp. Not to mention, I imagine Michael Maguire was a key figure in setting up the New Zealand A team, who played against Tonga A. So obviously both parties, that they brainstorm these things, and it's a good idea. Shout out to Tonga Rugby League for their fantastic development work they do. So Michael Maguire had a whole nother A team in camp for that period. So now we're seeing how serious the Kiwis development pipeline is, and getting those players together. But it's most evident with the best players, and the best players love Michael Maguire. Apparently, they formally and informally voiced their strong support for Michael Maguire, which means they probably submitted some stuff to the New Zealand Rugby League board, and they also, out the back said, hey, got to keep Michael Maguire around, or else we're going to be
doors.
or else we're going to be unhappy. So if the best players love Michael Maguire and what he's doing, why would you want to change anything? But he's New South Wales Origin coach now, and that's an issue. Conflict of interest. The only example you hear about Michael Maguire and the conflict of interest in this job is about New South Wales players. And I will keep repeating this because this is the funniest thing. Everyone is overlooking the fact that Michael Maguire may be sabotaging Queensland. Because he literally selected Benjamin Takura and Jack Howarth, two up-and-coming Queensland players with Aotearoa roots. He selected them in the New Zealand A team, and they both played for New Zealand A. So don't worry about New South Wales. Like, I do appreciate that. Yeah, I'm explaining the conflict of interest, right? But I want Michael Maguire as Kiwis coach. I think he can do both jobs. Like New South Wales Rugby League, they have changed it from like a Brad Fittler overlord situation, full-time job, to just a part-time job, just coach the team, get the job done, that type of thing, which Michael Maguire can do both roles. But the conflict of interest is in him selecting players to get it. Like they might not have an eligibility issue. They might just continue to play for Queensland and not play for New Zealand. That's a possibility. But Michael Maguire literally got two young Queensland prospects into the New Zealand A team at a time when he is becoming the New South Wales coach. That is a far greater conflict of interest of any New South Wales versus New Zealand eligibility battle. So it's been a very interesting situation. I was worried. Straight up and down, I was worried that Michael Maguire will be kicked out. Because there is conflict of interest. Like it is quite funny. Hopefully State of Origin just diminishes, goes somewhere else. We don't give a shit about it, and International Rugby League can take its rightful place as the elite level of rugby league and get a bit more prestige there. But I just kept coming back to the fact that, like, I'm pretty sure New Zealand Rugby League governance, they like Michael Maguire because he's good for business. Like, a good Kiwis team is good for New Zealand Rugby League. He is developing coaches. He is developing local coaches. He's developing leaders like Fisher Harris, Joseph Tapane, Asafa Solomona, Jerome Hughes, Nickel Clockstar. Nickel Clockstar played for Michael Maguire and his country in Test footy with a broken rib. What more do you want? So I just praise Jar for Michael Maguire and the fact that he is the Kiwis coach. Good things are happening there. Obviously, great things are also happening with the Kiwi Ferns. Like, everything I'm saying about the Kiwis also applies to the Kiwi Ferns. And regular listeners, hearty niche case folk, will know there's a lot more talent coming. Like, I've floated the idea that maybe the Kiwi-NRL juniors are better than Aussie juniors. I think the young Wahine from Aotearoa are better than the young Australian talent. That's where we're at the end of 2023, and Michael Maguire is still coach for the foreseeable future. One more rugby league thing. I would like to express something that has been in my head for a while, was just a lot of confusion around where the Fa'atili brothers were at in the rugby league landscape. The Fa'atili brothers, both of them are from Christchurch, Hornby juniors, I believe, and they were dominating rugby league in Aotearoa before going to Australia, and they were both affiliated to the Broncos through Wynnum, although there wasn't a whole lot of concrete connection to the Broncos. So when I was rather chuffed yesterday when I saw a picture of Felix Fa'atili training with the Sharks NRL squad, and I voiced that in the subscriber podcast, because now there is just clarity in where the Fa'atili brothers are at. Felix is a rising young forward in the Sharks system, and Caius has a training trial deal with the Storm. I've talked through kind of the training trial situation. I've mentioned, like, we've got lots of information about Felix Fa'atili as well, because he's dominating with the Sharks. He was playing SG ball and Jersey flag this season, scoring a heap of tries. But like, I'd always had them as really good young forwards from Aotearoa, but there wasn't a lot of clarity as to what NRL system they were in, because they were never really celebrated as being Broncos youngsters in the same way that someone like Xavier Willison or Dean Mariner had done. And so that was just like, I kept identifying them as up-and-coming Kiwi-NRL forwards, but there wasn't like a certified NRL connection. As we end 2023, along with praise jar for Michael Maguire, we have clarification on where Felix and Caius Fa'atili are at, and they are in really good positions. Cronulla Sharks have a theme of recruiting big boppers from Aotearoa, and of course, Melbourne Storm. There was I think there's a photo of Caius Fa'atili training with the Melbourne Storm squad, but it's the back of him. So he's basically, like, you kind of think it's him because he's a big unit and he's got, I don't know what you call it, he's got like the dual ponytails. Like, it was a mullet, but it's been tied up into dual ponytails, a bit like some, Obelix and Asterix or some type of stuff from back in the day. But so I think I'm waiting for a better photo of Caius Fa'atili in the Storm system. But what are you doing in the Storm system over summer? You're working really hard. And so I think it's going to be good for Caius Fa'atili. And we have Ford Trophy cricket this weekend. There's a bunch of games on Saturday. We have Canterbury hosting Wellington, Central hosting Northern Districts in Nelson, and Otago hosting Auckland in Invercargill. Those will be followed by Ford Trophy games on Wednesday. I've got one or two things for each team that I want to throw out. You can stop me after any point, or you can let me go and then add your little 2 cents in as you wish. Auckland, I'm curious about Addy Ashok, his workload. He's bowled a lot of Plunket Shield overs, one of the busiest bowlers in Plunket Shield. And if that continues into the Ford Trophy, there's going to be a good trend of Ashok churning out the overs, which you want from a young spinner in domestic cricket. Northern Districts, Cartene Clark. Oh, it was meant to have the stats right here. Cartene Clark hasn't scored a lot of Plunket Shield runs this season. But that's all right, because Cartene Clark's best format is not Plunket Shield or first-class cricket. It is one-day cricket and T20 cricket. His best averages in List A, 28.9, and he's got a really good Super Smash record of 25 average, 143 strike rate. So I'm curious what Cartene Clark does after a pretty lean patch of Plunket Shield cricket. He had no scores over 20. So hopefully he goes better in the Ford Trophy. And Josh Clarkson, Central Districts, very powerful hitter down the order, good all-rounder. Massive season last season, helping Central win the Ford Trophy and the Plunket Shield. Hasn't been quite as good to start this season, but we're coming into white ball cricket. What impact does Josh Clarkson have as a powerful middle order hitter? Gareth Severin for Wellington has been a fantastic Plunket Shield batter, but he hasn't played any List A cricket. So he's averaging 46.8 in first-class cricket, hasn't played Ford Trophy. What's he going to do? And also Ben Sears was playing a lot of Plunket Shield. So hopefully he improves with a consistent role with Wellington. The Canterbury lads, guess what I'm going to say for Canterbury?
I'm going to guess it's something to do with tall seamers.
And Zach Folks.
Is he not tall?
He's not that tall. That's why it's so surprising. Like,
I guess no one's really tall compared to Henry Shipley and Will O'Rourke and old Carl Jamison went back to Canterbury, didn't he, as well? He's not obviously going to be there, but all the tallest bowlers play for Canterbury.
Zach Fox, one of the best young cricketers in Aotearoa. Will O'Rourke, one of the tall seamers. But you've also got Fraser Sheet, who has a first-class average of 25, one-day average of 43. And I think if Sheet gets a good run of Ford Trophy cricket, he should make an impact in the Ford Trophy. Otago, we haven't had a lot of Dean Foxcroft in the Plunket Shield so far. So I'm curious what Dean Foxcroft does for Otago and how Otago, we talked about this in the subscriber podcast, how Otago use their 2 spinning batters, or 3 with Foxcroft. He's a spinning batter. You got Ben Lockrose and Jamal Todd. Ben Lockrose had an impact in the Super Smash last season, bowling, I think, lefty spin, and he had some real powerful hitting flashes. Jamal Todd is a really good all-round cricketer from Auckland who is in his first season, and he could add value to that Otago team as well.
Right on. So you said those games are on Saturday, and then it's the Wednesday turnaround, is it? So it's not like the HBJ where they were playing double headers on like Friday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, or whatever it was. Are those aren't return fixtures coming up in the week as well?
No, it's just not really. No, it's just new. It's just new.
It's just games on games on. Yeah.
Speaking of HBJ Shield, I am really curious about that batting thing. Like, who is the best batter in New Zealand right now in domestic cricket? Because Michaela Gregg scored the most runs in the opening weekend, but Central did play a lot of cricket compared to other teams. I mentioned how the best batters were all younger batters, so I don't think any of them are going to really settle into a consistent groove. Jess McFadden has the best kind of career record, so it might be Jess McFadden, because she has a really good one-day average and scores runs for Wellington. But there's a lot of batters who would be wise to start scoring a lot of runs, because things are like up for grabs. The White Ferns squad does seem like the selectors, the coaches, they've got their favourites and they're building whatever, which should help them win against Pakistan in their upcoming series. Like, I think the White Ferns are better than Pakistan in New Zealand. But there's a lot of good bowlers. There's so many good bowlers. Like Kaylee Knight selected in that New Zealand 11. She could be replaced by her teammate, Lucy Boucher. Like, that's just how the seaming ranks are in Aotearoa, where you could replace her with Claudia Green. You could replace her with, Josie Penfold or Amy Hucker from Auckland. There's so many good young bowlers in Aotearoa, but there isn't the quality and number of batters who are dominating domestic cricket right now, and Kate Anderson hasn't played yet. So maybe it's Kate Anderson. Maybe it's another veteran. Maybe a youngster can see that there is the best batter in Aotearoa spot up for grabs, and they start scoring runs. So that's what I'm most intrigued about ahead of this weekend's double banger of games. And speaking of those double banger games, we have Canterbury hosting Otago in Rangiora, which will be backed up on Sunday. We've also got Auckland hosting Central, which will be backed up on Sunday. And we've got Northern Districts hosting Wellington and Hamilton. That is also on offer on Sunday. As far as the game matchups, I think all these teams are really competitive against each other. I don't really think there's a terrible team. I don't think there's a dominant team. I'm sure these matters will sort through themselves. But I'm still in a learning process of learning who's the best players. Because at this stage of the season, you can really see which teams did most of the work over the winter. Because how you start the season is a reflection of all the mahi you have done over the winter leading into the season. And by the opening weekend, I don't know if a lot of the senior players did the work and the youngsters did all the work, but we'll keep learning with another weekend of HBJ Shield. And of course, the Niche Case is your home for all domestic cricket matters. as well as Wellington Phoenix, and as well as National League football. Hold that thought, though, because I do have one weird cricketing stat that I need to throw at you.
Love a good weird stat.
Henry Nicholls has
Ball
scored...
tamperer. Sorry, pardoned ball tamperer.
Pardon ball tamperer, that's the one. He has hit a century in 7 consecutive years of Test cricket.
7. That's not far off Kane Williamson, who's done it in like 10 years in a row or something.
7 years in a row, Henry Nicholls has hit a Test century. Now, obviously, that's rather quirky, because last season he had 9 innings and he hit 1 century, which was a 200 not out. Many of these years, 6 of these 7 years, he's hit 1 century. But he's had a century in 7 consecutive years of Test batting, which isn't easy to do. But it also tells you the story of Henry Nicholls. He scores just enough runs to stay in that Test team. And as I didn't have him as a first 11 player up until kind of this point right now, where I think he's going to be in that first 11 to start against Bangladesh because he's got a century in 7 years of consecutive batting.
Does that include 2023?
That includes...
Was that this year, the 200?
The 200 was this year.
Yeah.
So
he's free.
And he was good in the Plunkett Shield. Yeah, the pressure's off Henry Nicholls. He doesn't need a century. He's already got it. So shout out Henry Nicholls, pardoned ball tamperer, member of the Plunkett Shield first stanza All-Stars, because he was fantastic aside from being pardoned for ball tampering. Now we see what happens in the Bangladesh Test Series. Let's get into
I don't think there was ever anything in that ball tampering thing to begin with, you know. Especially, like, how are you ever going to come up with anything from, like, grainy Plunkett Shield footage, you know? You're not exactly going to find some convicting evidence there. But, you know, he, like you said, he was outrageously good in Plunkett Shield with the bat. So, you know, he has earned his way in there, and I suspect he probably will be first 11 in Bangladesh. But it will be interesting to see how they do that, because you probably want to slide another batter who can spin, just like Otago's team. You want another batter who can spin in that lineup. So we'll see next week, I suppose.
The Mount Smart Extravaganza begins on Saturday. We've got the men playing first by the looks of it. Then we've got the women afterwards. And they are both playing... Oh, the men are playing Melbourne City, so I'll need to pull up a ladder here to check where Melbourne City are at. They are 9th. The Wellington Phoenix men are 3rd. And the women, they take on Perth Glory, who are 1st, top of the table. So we've got Perth are 1st in the Women's A-League. Wellington Phoenix are 3rd. Wellington Phoenix men are 3rd. And Melbourne City are 9th. Let's package them together. What are the chances? What are your expectations for the Mount Smart Extravaganza to start with 2 Phoenix wins?
Well, the way that both these teams have started, I'm happy to say that anytime they play at home, they should be at least expecting to win. Not necessarily that they will, but you at least have that kind of expectation that they can, and they're going to give it a good crack. Melbourne City men are a sneaky one, though, because that's traditionally a very good team. They had a bad start to the season, though. And the bad start to the season coincided with them getting them changing managers. So out went old mate Vidicic, who had ex-Phoenix, albeit brief, connections. And they've sort of... I think they had a big win coming back off that, so they might not be as bad as the table suggests. Their squad is a lot better than the table suggests. They will have ex-Phoenix midfielder Steven Ugarkovic, I'd imagine, out there. No Kiwis involved, but they have had weird links with Kiwi clubs lately, because they obviously knocked the Phoenix out of the Aussie Cup, for anyone who remembers that. few months ago, that was definitely a preseason kind of performance from the Phoenix. So I think we've seen as we expected to happen under Chiefy's guidance, midway through preseason, you're playing Aussie Cup games, you're not going to be at your full capacity on the stuff you've been working on. So they've definitely looked a more evolved team since then, and there's an argument to say that Melbourne City have, well, not an argument, it's a fact to say that they've had their stumbles since then as well. They've also been playing Aussie Champions League, Aussie Asian Champions League, which hasn't helped things. Funny thing about that is they're in the same group as Michael Vald's team from Japan, Vintfooted Kofu, and they played each other in the first game of the group stage and drew 0-0. So Michael Vald kept a clean sheet against them. That's one All Whites keeper has kept a clean sheet against Melbourne City this season. Now Alex Paulson will hopefully be back inside. I expect Alex Paulson will be all right to play this game. There might be question marks about Tim Payne because he did start both games for the All Whites, whereas Paulson was only there as a third string goalkeeper. So and Sermon did play off the bench in the first game against Greece, but only for a few minutes on debut. So I expect he's fine. But they'll obviously have to, that is a question mark to consider. And all three of those have been really key players of their defensive team. So that's something to ponder. Ben Knoll just signed a new contract, so he'll be fizzing. And it'll probably be the last time we see the Phoenix play a home game in Auckland, because from now on there will be an Auckland team playing home games in Auckland, which means the Phoenix will play in Auckland as often as they have been, which is twice a season or so. Once or twice a season, that'll still keep happening, but they'll now be away games, which is exciting, but not always for the same reasons that I think a lot of the buzz about that team has been. I think whatever, I'll save that for another article on the Auckland A-League team at some future date when a bit more information has come out, rather than just filling the void with speculation. But yeah, I think the Phoenix blokes have a decent chance. The Phoenix women, it's also a tough game for them because Perth have been really good lately. They've been winning games, and they've been winning them on the back of Grace Jale's goals. So there's an ex-Phoenix connection there as well. Everywhere Grace Jale goes, she makes teams better. The Phoenix got a whole lot better when she started, when she came back from injury midway through their first season. She goes to Canberra, turns them into a fringe playoff team. Canberra aren't doing so well since she's left, but Perth have gotten a whole lot better since she joined them. Expect to see her as a starting striker for the Football Ferns. I would hope to anyway, as well, with Millie Clegg injured and Hannah Wilkinson suspended for the games against Colombia. So, good value for Grace Jale, good reward for great form, playing in that striker's role for Perth as well. They do also have Liz Anton, who I think missed a game or two at the start of the season through injury. I don't think she's in the Football Ferns squad. I had it written down somewhere, but I'm pretty sure she was one of those who was not selected, and that would be correct. She missed the first game or two with a little injury, and she's actually come in playing more as a left back for Perth rather than the centre back. She's been one of the first names on the team sheet for the last couple of years as a centre back for Perth. She's actually playing more as a left back, which we have seen her do a little bit internationally. So it's something she's capable of, but it is just a notable point. You're likely to see Liz Anton out on the edges rather than through the middle. But yeah, Perth are good. Perth have been playing really well. They got a young Aussie midfielder, Hannah Lowry, who's extremely good and was a couple of years ago kind of first coming through as a 16 or 17-year-old and challenging Malia Steinmetz for minutes when Steinmetz was there. So player to watch out for there. They've been playing really well, and this is a game where the Phoenix women are coming off of probably their worst performance of the season in that Central Coast one, where just things didn't quite click, and maybe there was a little bit of fatigue, mental fatigue, even after a 3-game win streak. Things have been going great for them. They were going to have a bounce, whatever the opposite of a bounce back game is. They're going to just have a dud one at some point. They weren't far off. There was really just sort of like a 20-minute spell early at the start of the second half, which cost them. Other than that, they finished both halves better. They've been slow starters in every game so far, I think. So that's another thing to notice is whether they can get not necessarily score early goals, but just at least take a bit more control of the initial sort of 15, 20 minutes so they're not under pressure and not having to fight back from that, just whether they can sort of impose themselves from the start. But yeah, they're two tough fixtures, so it's not the kind of games where we turn up to your Mount Smart doubleheader being like, I'm accepting nothing less than 6 points here or anything like that. They'll have to work to win these games, but I do think these two teams are good enough to beat more or less, particularly at home, good enough to beat anyone on their day. So, and they've had a few days recently. They have both of these teams. The next blokes, I believe, are still undefeated, aren't they? I think two wins and 2 draws. So, long may it continue, basically.
Because of the Mount Smart connection, Mount Smart Extravaganza this weekend, I do feel the way you're describing those games, it feels like the Canberra Raiders are coming to town. Canberra Raiders coming to town. No matter how good or bad the Raiders are playing, they're always going to be a tough team. We saw that. There was a golden point game, I believe, at Mount Smart this year against the Raiders. Massive comeback from the Raiders. So no matter, like, the Warriors were better than the Raiders this year. It's just a tough game. And I think that was the toughest Mount Smart Warriors game that I can remember, because those other gauge games throughout the season, Sharks come to town, too good. I can't think of another one off my head, but the Bulldogs came to town, they suck, so it doesn't matter. The Cowboys...
They came to town twice and lost, I think.
No, it's home.
No, they couldn't have.
Yeah,
it's well, it's home or home and away.
Yeah, the Cowboys came to town. They were traveling all right. They got touched up. I think it's probably a mixture of the Raiders and Cowboys. How about that? Somewhere in between, because somewhere in between. Let's go into National League football, where women's final. Auckland United FC versus Southern United. Both finished the season on 22 points. Last week, Auckland United had a 4-1 win. Last week, Southern United had a 3-0 win. So they're both coming in to this final with a bit of form and the same amount of points. Men's National League final, Wellington Olympic versus Auckland City FC. Last week, Auckland City lost to Christchurch United. And Wellington Olympic had a 4-2 win over the Wellington Phoenix Reserves. So Wellington Olympic finished top of the table, 23 points. Auckland City finished on 21 points, which seems like a bit of a diversion for Auckland City, how they were traveling throughout the season. I think they were undefeated at one point. Now they've got 2 losses on their record, and they are the home team here. Mount Smart Extravaganza in Auckland. You've got Auckland City taking on Wellington Olympic. As we always say, it's the battle between the Croatians and the Greeks in Aotearoa. And then in the women's, you've got Auckland United as the home team against Southern United. So Wellington obviously travelling up from Wellington for the final in Auckland. And then you've got Southern United making a big old trek up from the deep south, which is it just Otago, or is it a mixture of a bit of Canterbury as well?
Otago, basically. Canterbury have their own team. Canterbury's team gets to encompass like the wider regions and like up to Nelson, but Otago is basically just Dunedin and some of the slightly further north and places, you know.
So Southern United are coming up from the deep south. So it's a bit of a road trip for Southern United, but they did finish second. Whereas you look at the men's table, Wellington Olympic, best team of the season, they're travelling to Auckland for an away game. The men's final, was that a repeat of last year's final?
It certainly is. The same 2 teams who played out a thriller 12 months ago, coming back to try do it again. Also played out a little bit of a thriller 2 weeks ago when Wellington Olympic beat Auckland City at Kiwi-NRL Street. The first team to win it at Kiwi-NRL Street for 6 years, according to the Auckland City stats, which didn't include. I looked this up. It didn't actually include. They did lose there once in a first leg, I think, of a semi-final against Team Wellington, but that was sort of a playoff game, so they didn't count that. So, but I kind of think you have to count that. So we'll say they'd lost once in 6 years at Kiwitea Street. Wellington United beat them with a bit of a late comeback. Then Christchurch United beat them 1 week later. So Auckland City are home. Technically it's a neutral venue, obviously, but it is a bit weird where you've got an Auckland team and a non-Auckland team in each of the finals, and the final is in Auckland. So it's kind of an unofficial home game. And Auckland City might prefer not being at Kiwitea Street since they lose there every week now.
So how did Wellington Olympic perform last season in a final where they had to travel to Auckland?
Pretty well. I mean, it probably wasn't their best performance, and it was a bit of a tricky one, more because of the opposition they were up against. I don't think Auckland City are as good this year as they were last year. I think that's quite clear at this point. I thought that even when they'd won like 7 games in a row, I still thought, I don't know if this team's playing the way they usually do. A lot of late comebacks, sort of just like cruising through 70 minutes, then rolling to subs and scoring a couple late goals and just not, I don't know, not dominating the way they ordinarily would. Certainly weren't blowing any teams away or anything like that. So I think the experience of last year will be massive for a Wellington Olympic team that's largely the same. Like, you're going to get 7 or 8 players who played in both of these finals. Auckland City will be probably similar continuity, but I think they've not replaced the other guys who have left as quite as well. City they've had the same. Adam Mitchell and Christian Gray have been the starting centre backs all season. Christian Gray got sent off last week, so they are going to have to find another centre back. I expect probably Mikey Denhire just slides back into CB, which I think he did do in their Club World Cup stuff. And they've actually got another Club World Cup stuff coming up in about 2 weeks. Like, this finishes, then they go off and do some more Club World Cup. So it's a little bit of a busy time for Auckland City, who just had been, like I say, maybe coasting through games a little bit too much for a lot of this season, whereas Wellington Olympic struggled. I don't think they've even kept a clean sheet. Like, they've conceding too many goals, but they also have scored 10 goals more than any other team. And this is a 9-week league. It's not that you get that much time to pull away by that much. They concede too many goals, but they score so many more than that it doesn't matter. They just win games 4-2, 5-2. They were 2-0 down against the Wellington Phoenix on the weekend, half-time. They win 4-2. You know, it doesn't matter. They're just going to, even if they only play the 45-minute performance, they're still going to roll out goals. And because they were able to do some stuff against Auckland City, I will say when they played City 2 weeks ago, neither team at full strength. Both were resting a couple guys. And it was only really in the last 20 when they went to their benches and was brought on some of their bigger guns that it became like, oh, here we got a contest now. And yeah, some goals ensued, but Wellington Olympic will take a lot from that. Even still, the fact that they were able to score goals at Kiwitea Street up in Auckland, that they've made that trip, that they've made that trip and been successful, that they've beaten this team for the first time they've ever beaten Auckland City. And they've had some close runs in last year's final, last year's round robin, earlier this year in Oceania qualifying. Some tough clashes with Auckland City. It's the first time they got over the line, so I think there's a lot of confidence to be gained by that. And frankly, at this point, they are the form team. They were undefeated. They might be they might not be the sort of traditional expected victors. That's just Auckland City whenever they play against anyone. But right now, I think Wellington Olympic are probably the favourites. They've been better, and they've scored, and they've more recently, like, they won the most recent head-to-head. They should have no lack of confidence, and I expect a nice competitive game, because I do think Auckland City also do still have they're the kind of team that rises to the occasion, and I do still think they got several more gears ahead of them that they haven't really shown throughout this National League so far.
For some reason, I was thinking like the Mount Smart did have yellow seats before, which was a bit of a Wellington Phoenix tinge. But now I think they're blue seats. So now you do have a bit of a Wellington Olympic, Auckland City vibration at Mount Smart Stadium. Who is the best player or most interesting player in the men's final that you'll be, maybe you aren't watching it because you're a little National League hipster. You'll be watching a lot of other blokes as well. but someone for us casuals to like, oh, that guy's got the ball. Let me check him out.
Some of this does depend on fitness stuff because Auckland City have had one of the reasons they have been like one of the reasons they have dipped lately is because you've seen guys like Liam Gilligan's been injured, Ryan DeVries has only played like one game in the National League, Chiro Garriga's been injured, so a few of their sort of key attacking players not been available, and I suspect those will look like injuries where maybe I'm not expecting them to turn up on the weekend. Whereas I think with Wellington Olympic, they've had similar things. Jack Henry Sinclair's been rested for a couple games. He has Ben Mata's been having his minutes managed as well. Justin Gully, I think, too. So those are based on how they've been treated and based on the looks of it, I think those are more likely the Wellington Olympic guys are able to play this final versus some of those injured Auckland City dudes. But just because, yeah, if Jack Henry Sinclair's playing, he's a dude to watch regardless. But just sticking to the players that I know for sure will be playing. Joel Stevens had the most assists for anyone this year. Unsurprising that would be a Wellington Olympic player who did so. He's been playing on the left wing, so the opposite role to what Jack Henry Sinclair does on the other side, and just like he runs the ball well, he crosses the ball extremely well, he gets in and scores goals. He's a set piece threat with his deliveries as well, both his crossing and also just scoring from free kicks. He's done that a couple of times. He's been absolutely brilliant. He is obviously some people will remember him from having a wee stint with the Phoenix when he was young. He also has played professionally in Sweden for a few years, and he has been capped by the All Whites once upon a time. I think Joel Stevens is the form attacker in the entire league, although obviously you want to keep an eye out for like proven goal scorers such as shared Golden Boot, Gianni Bazookas, and also Hamish Watson should be playing. And we know Hamish Watson loves playing against Auckland City. Hamish Watson versus Auckland City, there's going to be some niggle involved. That's always, you want to keep an eye on him for non-football reasons as well as football reasons when this fixture's going down. For Auckland City, I don't know. I just don't think you can look past Cam Howison. As much as that seems like the obvious answer, he's also their best player, and he's just so good at facilitating what they do. At the start of moves, but also at the end of moves. He scores goals from midfield. He sets up a lot of stuff. His passing's incredible. He's always a threat to just take a shot from halfway as well. He knows he can score those, and he's going to try it. There's a reason he's the only guy from this level who ever gets called up for All Whites games, and it's as much as it's the obvious answer, it's because it's the right answer. He is the key player for Auckland City.
He's the key player, but Hamish Watson is the National League Big Donny. He is the biggest Donny of all National League Big Donnies. Same question for the women. And you can extrapolate out to any themes or ideas in the women's final as well.
Yeah, so the women's final is because that's the men's final is the same two teams who made it last year. The women's final is two different teams, two fresh teams who've never played in a grand final like this before, which Southern United did win the South Central series that year where they had that, but that was the year when there were no Auckland teams involved, and it sort of feels like its own competition. It was a National League season, but it was its own competition. It doesn't necessarily prepare you for going up to Auckland and playing a grand final. However, looking through their fixtures, and they've been so good this year. Like they've just clinically put teams away. They've hardly ever trailed in any of these ones. They lost 1-0 against Eastern Suburbs in the first game of the season and have not lost since. They've won 7 of 8 since. The one game they didn't win is also the only time they've actually had an away game in Auckland. So their other away games, they had 2 in Wellington and they had 1 in Central. They caught 3 of the 4 Auckland teams at home, but the one away game that they played against an Auckland side was against Auckland United, and that was a 1-1 draw. They were leading. Auckland United came back and tied it up. It was a pretty good game. It sort of felt like a game where both teams were making sure they didn't lose because they knew where they stood in the sort of shape of things with the grand final down the line, and that's exactly what happened. As both teams were able to win their remaining games and book their places. It's an awkward last week because it was a fascinating last week because there were still 4 teams who could have made the final at that point. Western Springs had to get up and see if other teams would drop points. They were 2-0 down with 20 minutes to go and then won with a 95th minute winner. Eastern Suburbs also at kicking off all these games at the same time. Eastern Suburbs had to win to knock Western Springs out and also hope someone else dropped points for them. They were 2-1 down late on and then won with a 98th minute winner. But neither of those winners ended up mattering because Auckland United took care of business, Southern United took care of business. And that's what they've been doing throughout the season. These are the two best defensive teams for sure, like undoubted. Auckland United, I think, have conceded more goals, but they conceded them in the first couple of weeks, and it's since then, especially since Amy Hall's come in as goalie, they've been just fantastic defensively. But then also, I'm looking at Southern, and they've only conceded 3 goals in the last 6 weeks as well. So they are the two best defensive teams. Interesting, a couple of Southern's best players, Kendra Smith and Marissa Porteous, are actually from Auckland. They're West Coast Rangers players who went down and played for Southern after West Coast Rangers missed out. So they probably enjoyed the 3-0 win over Ellerslie more than anyone, because not only did it send them into a grand final, but it also a bit of revenge against the team that pipped them at the post for National League qualification. I think the player to watch for Southern, depending on, it's tough because they have such a good first 11. I could kind of nominate about 7 of their different players and make a genuine case. But let's say that the back three of Tony Power, Hannah McKay-Wright, and Marissa Porteous all kind of balance each other out by being real good. Let's say that Kendra Smith and Rose Morton balance each other out. I think the key player who's probably going to go the most way to determining whether they can win this game is striker Amy Hislop, who is a Southern native, went and played a little bit in the USA to do some college stuff. And whatever she learned there, sure she learned some stuff in her actual studies as well, but she definitely learned a lot of football because she's come back throwing in step overs and Cruyff turns and just dummy and pass. She's a big striker too. She's tall, she's strong, so she's not necessarily the player who looks like she'd be out there. Like one of their other forwards is Maggie Diaz, who's like 5 foot nothing, and obviously someone like that is going to be quick-footed and thrown in step overs. She does that. Amy Hislop's doing it as well at like 5'10" or something like that. And she's been their top scorer. She's been a fantastic. She's really good hold up play, all this stuff. She's a key player for them. For Auckland United, best player, I think, is probably Yume Harashima, their CDM, their defensive midfield facilitator, Japanese import. Absolutely brilliant. One of those players who's just always in the right place, always makes the right pass. But for them to win, they have actually, like I mentioned, they've had the best defense. They have struggled, though, to turn good chances into goals. And the one player who takes them over the top, the one player they've normally leaned upon when it comes to that time, and we need a goal, someone's got to step up, everyone else is missing chances, let's give the ball to Bree Johnson. Bree Johnson, left winger for them, really good dribbler, the best finisher in their team. Not necessarily the best player, but I think maybe the key player for them as to whether they'll be able to get goals here. I think the Auckland City Wellington Olympic game could be a high scorer, has potential to be a high scorer, just because of the way those teams play, Olympic in particular. The other game, I think, is we're probably looking somewhere close to that 1-1, might be extra time kind of territory as well. Again, rather.
Boom. Boom. Booyakasha. Did a little combo there. That is the Niche Cast. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Enjoy all the Aotearoa sporting action happening over the weekend. And, of course, enjoy Aotearoa. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.